Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show, Week 10 game-by-game preview edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to do just that. All 14 matchups coming at you. I'm going to be trying to give you at least one cool thing from each and every team involved. So love this show and love doing it with my guy, Matthew Freedman, Matt F. the Oracle in the house. Happy Week 10, Freedman.
Yeah, week 10. This is like officially the point where I start to really Thanksgiving and like the end of the season. And it's like, all right, like we're getting close to like, we're not quite there in terms of like fantasy championships, but it's like you can see like the end getting nearer and nearer each week. So excited to break down these games and to get closer to Thanksgiving, where you got all the great foods coming at Thanksgiving. Of course, spumoni had to get that in there.
Great job, Freeman. I'd a little bit more of an over on the time that I might take you to get Spumoni out, but you never disappoint. So again, all 14 matchups coming up. That said, it is Wednesday in the middle of the NFL season, so we have quite a few injuries to get to first. Accordingly, it's time for our DraftKings opening lines. Starting things off with the quarterback position, still don't know who is going to be starting for the Jets. I would tend to think Justin Fields, but Tyrod Taylor is practicing in full after missing week 8 with that knee injury. So at a minimum, it is looking like both guys will be active and accordingly could have short leashes for whoever winds up starting. Also have Kyler Murray being placed on IR with that foot injury, benching, whatever you want to call it. Again, Jacoby Brissett is the starting quarterback for the Cardinals for the foreseeable future. And also, Freeman, we did get a clarification from Texans head coach DeMeco Ryans that CJ Stroud will not be suiting up this week due to a concussion. Next man up is going to be Davis Mills. How much did you adjust those projections?
Yeah, against the spread, and this might sound really ridiculous given how great CJ Stroud was a couple of years ago and how subpar Davis Mills was to start his career. But at this point, we have CJ Stroud as about like 2.5 or 3 points better than Davis Mills against the spread. And I think that just speaks to really how lackluster this offense has looked, even with CJ Stroud over the past, at this point, year and a half. So it's a downgrade, but not a massive downgrade.
Obviously, Nico Collins has been dominating the Jaguars 4 straight games north of 100 yards. Hopefully, Davis Mills can be, do his best CJ Stroud impression and keep the good times rolling there. Over in the running back streets, we'll start off with the good news and just slowly make things more and more miserable, okay? So we got Quinshon Judkins not listed on the injury report coming off the bye with the shoulder injury. That's great. DeAndre Swift is actually starting off the week with a limited practice, again, coming back from that groin injury, seemingly putting him on track to suit up against the Giants. We also have Bill Crosby-Merritt limited, but it's a tooth issue, which seems to be popping up more and more in the NFL. So no reason to believe he is going to be missing any game action, though. We also have Panthers running back Rico Dowdle not practicing with the quad. That said, don't freak out, everyone. Keep your composure. Dave Canales already said the Panthers are, quote, being smart and said we are counting on him this weekend. We are still expecting Rico Dowdle to play, but yeah, getting a full practice in by the end of the week would be ideal. More problematic for Freeman. This is where the, good vibes start going south. Bills running back James Cook dealing with ankle and foot injuries starting off the week with a DMP. Apparently did suffer the injury during the game. It seemed like he kind of got rolled up on his last carry. So on the one hand, we saw this play out in one game last year, and Ray Davis wound up racking up 23 of the backfields combined, 27 carries and targets. Really was the Ray Davis show, and he looked good. On the other hand, they did pay Ty Johnson this offseason, and there's just been far more involvement recently from Ty Johnson over Ray Davis. Where do you fall with this one, Freeman? Because this could be important to get this right if James Cook is out, because pretty good matchup coming up against the Dolphins.
Yeah, that is tough and unfortunate. And right now, I would still expect James Cook to end up playing in this game. Obviously, we need to monitor the practice reports as the week unfolds. But if James Cook is out, I would probably project this at a near even split between Ty Johnson and Ray Davis. And Ian, as you said, last year when Cook was out, Ray Davis was awesome. But this year, when they've had the opportunity to spell James Cook with Ray Davis, they haven't done it. And Ty Johnson has continued to have involvement as the pass game back. And sometimes he's even gotten more rushing work than Ray Davis, which just kind of blows my mind. So I would expect an even split. Hopefully we don't have to see that situation play out.
Again, I probably rank Ray Davis a little bit higher, but it wouldn't be like putting him in as a top 10 running back. I do tend to think 60, 40, 55, 45. And the Freedman's point could very well just be right down the middle. Hopefully, I have more news on that by the end of the week. Also, have Aaron Jones not practicing with the shoulder and toe injury. The Vikings told us it wasn't too serious. We'll see if he manages to get the practice here on Thursday or Friday. Will be the Jordan Mason show, obviously, if not. Ramondre Stevenson still not practicing with the toe, setting up nicely for another Travion Henderson game. And sadly, Freedman, Bucky Irving still not practicing out of the bye with the foot and shoulder issues. We heard from Todd Bowles that he's running, which is good, but still hasn't been taking contact with that shoulder. So again, a DMP after already being off for 5 weeks and then having the bye, not exactly the way you want to start the week. So Rachaad White, his usage was down a little bit in his last game as a starter. That said, he got banged up a little bit early and they also just won comfortably. So still a situation where I will be pretty happy about leaning on Rachaad White. As an RB2, it is going to be a tough matchup against the Patriots, though. Moving on to the wide receiver streets. Good news of Puka Nacua. While he's going to be limited in practice with a rib injury, Sean McVay did say the scans look good and he feels good about him suiting up in week 10. We also have Luther Burden, Cedric Tillman practicing in full as they try to make their returns. Garrett Wilson limited in practice with that knee injury coming back, seemingly puts him on track to play. Cooper Kupp, Josh Palmer also limited. That said, Freeman, we do have some DMPs to get through. Michael Pittman, Ricky Pearsall, Chris Godwin, Kayshon Boutte, and Isaiah Bond all not practicing. Can we get any update on Ricky Pearsall at this point? I guess it's just going to be a Juwan Jennings show, but man, looking like a situation where it could just continue being Jennings, Kittle, and CMC, because in addition to Pearsall, we heard from Shanahan that the 49ers are, quote, pretty confident Brandon Ayuk will play at some point this season. I don't love that, Freeman. I'm not pretty confident that they're pretty confident here.
Yeah, and I feel like that's almost a really telling quote from Kyle Shanahan, who's like, we don't know if the world is going to be around in a week. Who's like, we think he's going to end up playing at some point this season. But in that same press briefing, he also did say they are not activating him or not opening his 21-day practice window this week. So, they have seeming confidence that he's going to play at some point this year, but it's definitely not this week. And with Pearsall, man, this guy has just, I don't want to say like he's injury prone because you just kind of never know how these things work out, but he didn't play much as a rookie. And then he's just been behind the 8 ball with injuries in his sophomore season. And given that he hasn't even attempted to practice in over a month, I just don't see the end being anywhere close.
49ers have one of these later season buys, so maybe he'll have a chance to get ready for the playoff push, but certainly not looking good for week 10. Also note that we did hear from Kellen Moore saying Devon Bailey will have a healthy role and be very involved the rest of the season for you guys in those skank leagues. And also from Jaguars head coach Liam Cohen said Parker Washington will be the team's primary slot receiver, going to be using Jacoby Myers more on the boundary. So still looking like a decent enough spot for Parker Washington, assuming BTJ and potentially Diamond Brown are also out of the picture. Bears tight end Cole Kmet limited to start the week with the concussion, puts him on track to potentially be able to suit up this Sunday. Obviously would be, a decent downgrade there for Colston Loveland, but maybe the rookie did enough to keep the job. And then finally, cornerback. Wow, caught myself, Freeman. Colts cornerback Sauce Gardner practicing in full with that concussion. He is expected to suit up for the Berlin-themed Sunday game at 9:30 against those Atlanta Falcons. Also, Lions right tackle Penei Sewell not practicing with a shoulder injury. Obviously, one of the best offensive linemen, NFL players, period, in the league. So keep an eye on that one. So with that, guys, let's get into the matchups. First, though, a quick words to our friends at DraftKings. This has been our DraftKings opening lines. Big games, big moments, and even bigger upside this week. I've teamed up with DraftKings Pick Six to give you a new way to get in on the action. With Pick Six, you ride the upside by making simple predictions. Will players score more or less than the number listed? You put your picks together, and the more you hit, the bigger your payout. And right now, guys, there is an incredible offer. New DraftKings Pick Six customers play $5 or more on your first pick set and get $50 in bonus picks. That's right. New customers play $5 or more on your first entry, and you'll get $50 in bonus picks instantly. So don't miss your shot to ride the upside. Download DraftKings Pick Six. Get on all the action and sign up using my promo code Fantasy Life. Thanks to DraftKings Pick Six for sponsoring this. Let's make this NFL season one to remember. Going through all 14 Week 10 matchups here on the Fantasy Life Show, starting off with Thursday Night Football, and then we'll slowly but surely go from the highest projected game to the lowest. So with that, Freedman, let's get after it. We got the Broncos hosting the Raiders as 9-point home favorites at Mile High. Game total resting at 42.5. So looking at the Raiders, hey, at this point, Ashton Genty, Brock Bowers, only guys we can really trust. We'll see how some of the wide receiver stuff plays out. Not exactly trying to go out of my way to play Trey Tucker and some of these guys, though, against, just a Broncos defense that is going to be doing good things, even without Patrick Surtain back there. So they just want to point out for those of you that maybe like putting a little bit of dough here on the player props, I do think Brock Bowers could just be absolutely force-fed the football. Yes, because he's Brock Bowers, but also because, guys, he's one of the rare tight ends that actually gets fed the football more so against man-heavy defenses, which the Broncos have actually run more than any defense in the league. So 34% targets per route run against man coverage for Bowers, only 23% against zone. So 22 targets in 2 games in this matchup last year kind of drives that point home. And looking at those odds again, 6.5 receptions, 66.5 receiving odds. I've been a losing gambler for 10 years, so take that for what it's worth, everyone. But I do like having fun in those streets, and accordingly, give me the overs. My biggest concern here is just Geno Smith hopefully staying alive. Pressure rate is not looking good. So with that in mind, Freedman, let's go to the team with, I would say, a few more fantasy relevant options. And you want to talk about someone that inexplicably is the number 1 target earner on the Broncos this year, Troy Franklin, one of Freedman's favorites this week.
Yeah. So I would not say that, I wouldn't be so bold as to say when I'm looking at the utilization tool that we have that Troy Franklin is actually the number 1 wide receiver for the Broncos. But Ian, you mentioned it. Over the past 8 weeks, Franklin has a higher target share, a higher air yard share, and a higher end zone target share than Courtland Sutton. And I know he hasn't really translated all of that into a big amount of production, but it feels like the potential is there. And Courtland Sutton, I feel like has kind of been getting by on like size a little bit, but like he just doesn't seem to be as athletic now as he was a few years ago. And it just feels like he's close to falling just down the production cliff. And I think at some point we see more of everything shift to Troy Franklin. And then you look at the matchup with the Raiders, number 6 in most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. It just feels like this could be a Troy Franklin game on top of the usage that he gets anyway. So Troy Franklin really stands out to me. And then, of course, just all of the other guys in this offense. It really could be an onslaught, boy. But Troy Franklin seems like the guy who's sort of like maybe a little bit undervalued according to his reputation.
Marvin Mims also ruled out once again with that concussion, so even more targets to go around there. Let's get to the only game of the week with an over-under north of 50. That is going to be the Dolphins hosting the Bills. Bills are 9.5-point road favorites. But hey, looking at that Dolphins team, guys, this matchup has not gone well for Tua Tagovailoa over the years. Just 1 in 9 in 10 career matchups against the Bills. And honestly, guys, even the only one he won was pretty freaking fluky, okay? They won 21-19, and they were outgained by nearly 300 yards against the Bills in that one. So Tua's only thrown 2 or more touchdowns in 3 of 9 of those games. He's got 11 touchdowns versus 11 interceptions total and just a 6.6 yards per attempt. Has only cleared 235 passing yards on 1 occasion. He's got his 3rd lowest passer rating against any opponent against the Buffalo Bills. So unfortunate, but this is also kind of carried over into Jalen Waddle's production. Has cleared 100 yards in 2 of 8 games against the Bills, but under 50 in the other 6. So again, has not been consistent. Really the only one that has been in this matchup, Devon Achane, guys, 5.9 yards per carry in 5 career games against the Bills. And the Bills this year, mostly I would say due to ongoing injuries to Ed Oliver and then Matt Milano, have actually been a bottom 7 defense in terms of PPR points per game allowed to RB. So I think with how Waddle's playing without Tyreek Hill and just kind of the volume involved, you're not going to be taking him out of your lineup, but would maybe just suppress, boom expectations here. And otherwise, just keep on trusting Devon Achane. So, not too much good stuff going on with the Dolphins, Freedman. That said, on the Buffalo Bills side, once again, looking like a team that can score 40 plus points and not even sweat while doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And agree with you on Achane. He's just been absolutely great this year. 880 yards, 7 touchdowns, and what we've seen so far from him. But looking at the Bills, man, I have to say, I tend to be skeptical about dudes who have extreme efficiency, but Dalton Kincaid, I feel like what we've seen out of him is going to continue in week 10. And at various points this season, I've been skeptical of Kincaid because I normally don't expect efficiency like this to continue. But man, I mean, I think what we've seen out of him in terms of the efficiency is legit and actually might stick. Now, sort of like the downside, Kincaid doesn't have a game with more than 6 targets this year. Like that is not good, right? Even for a tight end, like that's not good for a top tier guy. And his time on the field has declined ever since he missed week 6 with that oblique injury. He returned after the week 7 bye. He's had just a 51% route rate. But even so, his target rate has skyrocketed 32% over his past 2 games, and his target share has jumped up to 19%. And so for the season, he's the number 2 tight end in air yard share and the number 4 tight end in end zone target share. So even though he's not getting a ton of targets, he's getting the targets that matter, or he's getting the usage that matters. He's being targeted down the field and targeted in the end zone. And so he still has the ability to turn a relatively small number of targets into a lot of production. And you've seen that with the numbers: 411 yards, 4 touchdowns receiving. Only Jake Ferguson has more than Kincaid's 3 top 5 tight end finishes. And again, 12.5 yards per target. That is bound to regress at some point, but probably not this week. The Dolphins are number 3 in largest fantasy boost allowed to tight ends, and free safety Ashton Davis is dealing with a quad injury and is uncertain to play. So in week 3 against the Dolphins, Kincaid had 5 receptions, 66 yards, and a touchdown. I feel like that's kind of the general vicinity of where he's going to be this week.
158.1 passer rating when Josh Allen's targeted Dalton Kincaid this year. That is the best mark in the NFL and just a hair below legit perfection. So awesome stuff from Kincaid, but I'm with you. Can we get your clear-cut best and most efficient receiver of the football a little bit more and get him on the field at least? A man can dream. Moving on to an NFC West showdown. We got the 49ers hosting the Rams, who are 4-point road favorites. Game total up there at 49.5 though. And guys, this is time to ask the question, I should say, how much do we trust Juwan Jennings this week? Let's actually rank them between 1 and 10 on the Vanna Cream Trust meter. And with that in mind, Freedman, I'm going to say about a 5. It's a situation where I thought I was done trusting Juwan Jennings at all after we found out he's playing through 40 broken ribs and a myriad of other issues. But he has caught at least 4 passes in 3 consecutive games. And even with George Kittle back in action, he's been a number 2 target in this offense. So still remains to be seen if we're going to get Brock Purdy back in the picture. But just with the way Mac Jones has been playing, man, it really just overall in terms of passing production isn't going to be a big sign of, radically changing what we're expecting out of this passing game. So look, Kendrick Bourne went nuts in this game the first time they played, 142 yards, but just 87 combined yards in these last 3 games. And we got to remember, no Juwan Jennings in that original matchup. So with Jennings, he's coming in as our consensus wide receiver 30 in our fantasy life ranks, guys. That's ahead of Keenan Allen, Jameson Williams, Alec Pierce, and Tez Johnson. He is still behind Khalil Shakir, Romeo Doubs, DJ Moore, Wandale Robinson, and a few others. But yeah, man, I would say the one concern here, talking about some of those man zone splits, Jennings has been someone who really has eaten against man coverage more so than zone, and the Rams this year have been running more zone than many other defenses out there. So more than anything, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, as you guys know, keep them in those lineups. Jennings more of a wide receiver 3. So again, a 5 on the Vanna Cream Trust meter. But yeah, this segment has been sponsored by Vanna Cream, which gives guys no nonsense, fragrance-free care designed for sensitive skin, because even guys sometimes need a little help. Freeman, hit me with some Rams goodness, particularly someone who, as much as everyone wants to continue to just act like Blake Corum is becoming a thing, is still on pace for 323 touches on the season. How you liking Kyren Williams ahead of this spot?
Yeah, Kyren Williams, 752 yards from scrimmage in 8 games, and people are acting like he's not a good NFL player. And I mean, look, maybe he's not. Maybe it's all just Sean McVay's goodness. But what I can say is that Kyren Williams, for his career, has been an elite NFL player going against the 49ers. In week 5, he had 131 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Niners. Last year, in 2 games, 228 yards and 3 touchdowns. The year before that, in 1 game, 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then you look at the 49ers defense. They have just been absolutely decimated in the front 7. They are without edges Nick Bosa, Yetur Gross-Matos, and Mikael Williams, their rookie first rounder. And then Bryce Huff also is uncertain to play. Those are their top 4 edge rushers that they could be without. And then, of course, the great Fred Warner at linebacker, they are without him as well. So it just feels like another situation where Kyren Williams is going to run all over the 49ers. And I will say, in week 5, he also had 10 targets, right? Like, it's a situation where without Fred Warner back there, they might be more susceptible to running backs in the passing game. So whether it's on the ground or through the air, I think Kyren Williams has 100 yards and, I mean, who knows, multiple touchdowns in this game.
Hopefully multiple touchdowns. The only way he wouldn't is if Devontae Adams keeps on doing his thing, guys. 16 end zone targets this season for Adams. George Pickens is at 14. Nobody else in double digits. So that's been the only reason why Kyron hasn't, I think, returned even better numbers. Still sitting pretty, though, as I think the RB12 on the season, returning exactly the value that you bought him at. Love when that happens. Freedom, let's talk about the Commanders hosting the Detroit Lions. 9.5-point road favorites here. Game totals resting at 49.5. So looking at the Lions, guys, this is a David Montgomery spot, okay? It's a Commanders defense that finally actually did a pretty good job on the ground against the Seahawks. But honestly, I think that was just because Sam Darnold wouldn't throw an incompletion. So why did they even need to worry about running the football? Previous to that, though, had allowed 125 plus rushing yards in 5 consecutive games. And man, just overall, these last handful of weeks has been rough sledding here for Washington. They've allowed 44, 28, and 38 points over the last 3 weeks. Only the freaking Bengals have allowed more points to the Washington Commanders during that stretch. You never want to be in a conversation with those guys. So again, really tough stuff for Washington. I know Monty, you always had the risk of Jahmyr Gibbs just, really taking over and getting more work. But over these last 5 games, that's really only happened once. 13, 15, and 19 touches in 3 of his last 4 games. He'd have 6 and then kind of a weird one against the Chiefs. So like in Monty, is our consensus RB22 ahead of guys like Kenneth Walker, Tyrone Tracy, Alvin Kamara, still behind Travion Henderson, Travis Etienne, and J.K. Dobbins. But yeah, if you have Monty, this would be the good week to start him. Freeman, over to your side of things with the Washington Commanders. You want to highlight arguably the best quarterback streamer of week 10, someone that I just spent a good bit of fab on, in my super flex streets out there. So tell me some good things here about Marcus Mariota.
Yeah, on the Thursday show, Dwayne will talk about his sicko starts, and I just have a feeling that it might be Mariota this week. Maybe not, maybe, but I always like to try to guess who Dwayne is going to talk about, but I could see Mariota. And I mean, yet once more, starter Jaden Daniels is injured for the Commanders. Head coach Dan Quinn has said there's quote unquote no timetable for his return, which just feels like, man, we might not see him for the rest of the season. And Mariota is rostered in just 5% of leagues. He's done well, or at least well enough, when he's been given the opportunity by the Commanders. So last year, he played more than 50% of the offensive snaps in just 2 games. But in those games, 366 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 90 yards and a touchdown rushing. And then this year, he hasn't been as clean of a thrower in his 3 starts, but he's still been good enough. And then on the ground, he's gotten the job done with 88 yards and a touchdown rushing. Now, the situation around him absolutely sucks, right? He could be without his top 3 wide receivers. Terry McLaurin with the quad issue. Noah Brown is on IR. Luke McCaffrey with the shoulder. So I was wrong. 3 of his top 4 wide receivers. So that situation is bad. But then you look at the Lions, right? And they're also pretty beat up in the secondary. They could be without starters and cornerback Terrion Arnold, who's dealing with a shoulder injury, free safety Kirby Joseph with the knee. And that doesn't mention the guys who are already on IR. Cornerback DJ Reed, cornerback Khalil Dorsey, cornerback Ennis Rakestraw. So that is at least good in terms of the matchup. And then the Commanders are playing their second straight game at home, and they will probably need to throw heavily as underdogs. And then the Commanders, it's the sicko play, but it just feels like their offense can't be this bad for this long. They still have enough okay players, and I still like what we saw out of Cliff Kingsbury last year, to where I think this offense could be better than what we've seen. And then even if it's not, at least we have the rushing ability with Mariota. So that is my streamer. I'm not going to say sicko call because that's Dwayne's thing, but I'm saying I think there's a shot that this is Dwayne's sicko call.
If I had to pick what's worse than sicko, like a deathbed wide receiver option for this week, I would go with Jalen Lane Freeman for all those wide receivers you just mentioned being hurt, for all the defensive back injuries for the Lions. And if you do look at the Washington man zone splits, Jalen Lane has actually had some of the biggest, Ned Stark differences versus man in zone. He's actually been the most efficient receiver against man, and the Detroit Lions love to run man defense more than just about anyone. So Jalen Lane for you, true, again, deathbed 14-team league, 3 flex people out there could be your guy, pal. So plenty more matchups to get to, though, guys. First, though, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Huel. Hey, guys, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Huel, who produce no prep, fast, nutritious, plant-based plant-based meals that don't compromise your health. Huel has 2 meal replacement products in particular that have really been helping me avoid skipping meals or feeling bad about eating something quick and crappy during the day. We actually have a ready-to-drink option right here that includes all sorts of tasty flavors. Chocolate peanut butter is my personal favorite. And I've been pleasantly surprised at how full I've stayed for hours after drinking it. They include 35 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, 27 essential vitamins and minerals, no added sugar, also gluten-free, all for under $5 per meal and ready to go in this economy, no less. We also have the daily greens drink, which for someone who despises the existence of vegetables like me, really is a game changer to stay healthy, but be quick about it. Again, these are actually developed by registered nutritionists and dietitians. They have 42 vitamins, minerals, and superfoods, only 25 calories, 4 grams of fiber, and just 1 single gram of sugar. So yeah, Huel makes healthy eating simple. They also just launched in the Target stores nationwide. You can actually try both of these at a good price because, guys, we have a 15% off token for you with the purchase for new customers with my exclusive code FANTASYLIFE at www.huel.com/fantasylife. Again, use that code FANTASYLIFE and fill out the post-check survey to help support the show only at Huel. We got the Colts hosting the Falcons at 6.5-point home favorites. Game total at 48.5. And looking at this Falcons team, guys, we haven't had a ton of great stuff going on outside of Bijan Robinson, but man, has Drake London been a bright spot otherwise in the passing game that, again, has been a bit inconsistent. But the one consistency we have is Michael Penix force-feeding this dude the football. When we look at their 10 games now together, he has 116 targets, guys. That is a 197 target pace over the course of a 17-game season. And my goodness, the amount of just massive performances we've already seen really is blowing my mind. Drake London already has not 1, not 2, but 3 separate overall wide receiver 1 PPR finishes in just 10 games catching passes from Michael Penix. So again, it's a situation where, yeah, we could see Sauce Gardner play, but even in the one-on-one matchups we've seen Sauce in this year, it's not like he's completely dominated each and every one. Certainly did win against Cortland Sutton and Tedero McMillan. They had fewer than 35 yards each, but DK Metcalf had 83 yards despite seeing plenty of shadow coverage from Sauce. Mike Evans had 33 yards and a touchdown before leaving early. George Pickens also gone for 57 yards and a touchdown. So again, not even a guarantee that we're going to see Sauce in a new defense in his first game tracking, Drake London all over the field. But even if he is, I do think there's enough target volume and London just being a stone cold baller these days for him to go ahead and win in style. So great stuff. And then just, overall, maybe we do see Kyle Pitts play well as well. We have the Colts giving up more points to tight ends this season, but more than anything, Drake London, the wide receiver 1 y'all in Atlanta, and certainly making the most of his opportunities. Freedman, going to the other side of things, though, it's a Colts offense that going into last week was literally number 1 in the entire 2000s in terms of points per drive. Steelers knocked them back to earth a little bit, but we've still seen far more good than bad from Daniel Jones and company through the first 9 weeks of the season. Who's exciting you in this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys stand out. Josh Downs, I want to give a little bit of shine to. So we talked about him this offseason because last year he was an elite target earner in terms of like the target rate, right? Like the number of routes that he's running and then how he's converting those into targets. We have seen him take a dip this year in his route rate and his target rate. And you put that together and it means that he's number 4 on the Colts in target share behind Pittman, Warren, and Alec Pierce. And an 18% target share. That's not great. And it's even smaller share of air yards at 16%. To put it in terms of utilization score, a 53 for the season, which is very modest. But at least he's still number 1 on the team in end zone target share. And over the past 4 games, he's been moderately productive with 3 touchdowns and 192 yards on 27 targets. Now, what really stands out to me in terms of the matchup that they have in this game in Germany is that the Falcons could be without slot cornerback Billy Bowman, and the slot is where Downs has played the super majority of his snaps. And you looked at the Falcons last week without Bowman, Demario Douglas went off for 100 yards and a touchdown on 6 targets. The week before that, Malik Washington with the Dolphins had 36 and a touchdown on 5 targets. So if Bowman is out, I think Downs will have a shot to actually lead the Colts in receiving this week, which would be nice for his investors to maybe start to see this year what they had hoped for when they drafted him this offseason.
New Jersey number narrative too. Freedman Downs now rocking the number 2, just like his brother Caleb Downs doing great things at the Ohio State University. Moving along, we got the Vikings hosting the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens are 3.5-point road favorites. Game total all the way up there at 48.5. So I want to start with the Ravens and just kind of look at the Brian Flores defense that started off the year incredible. I mean, they were ranked first in terms of EPA allowed per dropback throughout the first, 5 or 6 weeks of the season. Not so much recently though, guys. Over the last 3 weeks alone, Devonta Smith went for a $183 and a touchdown. A.J. Brown had 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta both had 97 yards. Ladd McConkey had 88 yards and a touchdown. Oh, yeah, Rondé Gaston, 77 yards and a touchdown. And yes, a little bit with the help of a push-off. Even Jamison freaking Williams torched him for 66 yards and a score as well. I think Zay Flowers is up next, guys. And I know I've been talking about this dude having a breakout now for a few weeks, but I will say the good news for Zay is he has only killed you in one single week this year. He's caught at least 5 passes in 7 of 8 games, which wasn't the norm. If you go back to last year, he actually only did that in 9 of 17 games. And accordingly, yeah, we've only had one true wide receiver, one worthy boom, and that happened back in week 1. But since then, Zay has not finished worse than wide receiver 32 other than one occasion. So again, yeah, we've had more of a floor than a boom here for Zay Flowers, but I think we got the right matchup for a guy who clearly has been the number 1 target for Lamar Jackson. And I just won't be betting on as many Ravens players having big games as they continue their playoff push as possible. Freedman, you want to look at the Vikings offense, one led by Thor's favorite person alive, J.J. McCarthy, who, yeah, I would say honestly played better than kind of the narrative that he was the worst quarterback alive, while he was tending to that ankle injury. But when you do start looking at some of the counting numbers and projections, maybe a little bit tough to be too optimistic about this passing offense as a whole.
Yeah, most of the show I kind of give the positive spin, but I am known for being a human wet blanket, and I am bringing all of that in this analysis of the Vikings offense. And I'm not saying that JJ McCarthy sucks now or will suck for the rest of his career, but the struggles are real. 148 yards passing per game. And it would be one thing if he were efficient and the team were winning big, but he has 5.2 adjusted yards per attempt in his 3 starts. And that's like subpar rookie type of stuff, 57.6 completion rate. And McCarthy has rushing ability, and that can help him sustain himself a little bit, but that doesn't help the rest of the offense in terms of fantasy. And the sample is small, but these splits for wide receiver Justin Jefferson with McCarthy are pretty telling, and they're indicative of why I was skeptical about Jefferson entering the season. In 3 games with McCarthy, he has 7.3 targets per game, 10 targets per game without him. With McCarthy, 4.3 receptions, without him, 6.8. And this is the big one. With McCarthy, 57.3 receiving yards per game, without him 95.4. And it's not as if this is like a Justin Jefferson thing. You see similar splits with the other guys in this offense. It is a JJ McCarthy thing, and that impacts everyone. And then if you look at the season-long numbers for the Ravens defense, it looks like they're a good matchup, but that's in part because they were injured and struggling at the beginning of the season. But over the past 3 games, they have really tightened up, and they've looked a lot like the Ravens defense of previous seasons. So since week 6, they've allowed 17, 16, and 6 points. Like, this is a really bad matchup for a Vikings offense that is really struggling. You put that together, and it just feels like this could be like an all-time bad game for McCarthy and everyone in this offense.
Ravens defense too, man. They got the Vikings this week, and the Browns, Jets, Bengals, Steelers, Bengals, and Patriots all the way up until week 16. So you're feeling pretty good before then. Have been playing better. And when I looked on Tuesday, still were rostered in under 50% of ESPN leagues. So again, would love to keep riding things out with the Patriots for a few more weeks. But Ravens, Bills, Browns, and if you're really desperate guys, the Panthers would might recommend DST streamers. Speaking of those Patriots, though, they are traveling to Tampa Bay to take on the Fighting Baker Mayfield's Buccaneers, sitting as 2.5-point home favorites. To game total is resting at 48.5. So looking at those Patriots mentioned at the top of the show, but still no Ramondre Stevenson. And contrary to many reports, we did not see the Patriots go and trade for a running back here before the deadline. So setting up nicely for Travion Henderson, who didn't exactly crush it in his first full game as a starter, but the usage was fantastic, guys. I'm sure Dwayne went from 6 to midnight looking at the utilization after this game. So 75% snaps, 20 combined carries and targets. And now they're in a matchup down the surface. Isn't great because Vita Vea and the Bucs Buccaneers have been one of the best run-stuffing defenses in the league. Not so great against running backs in the receiving game, though, and that is a big reason why. Tampa Bay has actually allowed the 8th most PPR points per game to opposing running backs, 3rd most from receiving in particular. So we all know Travion, very talented pass catcher when they feel like throwing with the football. Not a guarantee, but no Kayshon Boutte out there, maybe a few more targets to go around. I do like the idea of taking Henderson's receiving overs and also, again, slotting him in as a rock-solid RB, 2. So I think he's RB 20 in our consensus ranks, ahead of guys like David Montgomery, Kenneth Walker, Tyrone Tracy, still behind Travis Etienne, Kyle Monangai if Swift is out, J.K. Dobbins, and other people. But yeah, Travion Henderson, better late than never here in Fantasyland. Meanwhile, Freeman, we got a well-rested Buccaneers team, but unfortunately still pretty banged up. What's interesting you about them?
Yeah, the Bucky Irving situation is really disheartening because even though we didn't have solid reporting on it, it seemed like a lot of people were expecting that the Buccaneers would have Bucky Irving ready for week 10 after the week 9 bye. And to kind of put some perspective on it, right? Like you would assume, let me rephrase this, most teams kind of anchor their injury return strategy to the bye when possible. So if the Buccaneers had already had their bye when Irving suffered his injury, you would think he might have missed only 2 or 3 games, but because the team had the week 9 bye, the Bucs could have been like, all right, we're just going to give him a little bit of extra time to fully recover, and then we have him coming into week 10 and everything is great. But the fact that he has not practiced, like did not practice today coming off of the bye, is really bad, right? And it's just sort of indicative of he is unlikely to play, and the Bucs would have been better off sending him to IR immediately so they could have opened up that roster spot. But most guys, if they are returning, if they're injured and returning from the bye, they are practicing that first day after. So the fact that he has not practiced is really indicative to me of the fact that like this injury is a major deal. And it makes me just think like, who knows when we actually see him for the rest of the season. And then even if he were returning, the Patriots number 3 in fewest fantasy points allowed to running backs, just kind of an all-around bummer of a spot in regards to Bucky Irving.
Rashad White, my RB 18, assuming Bucky is going to be out. As Freeman said, tough matchup. Maybe Sean Tucker gets a little more involved down the way. Mentioned before, not the best usage in the game before the bye, but still someone who, again, deserves to be in the top 20 for however long Bucky is out. Hopefully not too much longer, but to Freeman's point, who knows? Guys, we have more matchups to break down. First, though, a quick word to our friends over at Mike's Hard Lemonade. Look, if you're deep in the fantasy trenches like us, you already know how to win it all. You've got to go hard. And guys, Fantasy HQ, powered by Mike's Hard Lemonade, is the ultimate tool for fantasy sickos. From managing all your fantasy leagues in one place to receiving personalized expert advice, dominate your fantasy season by using Fantasy HQ and by enjoying a Mike's Hard Lemonade while sweating your matchups on Sundays. Check out Fantasy HQ at fantasylife.com and find Mike's nearest you at mikeshard.com. Nobody makes lemonade like Mike's. That said, Mike's is hard. So is prison. Don't drive drunk. Note this is premium malt beverage with flavor. All registered trademarks used under license by Mike's Hard Lemonade Company in Chicago, Illinois. We're breaking down every Week 10 matchup here on the Fantasy Life Show. And as we move right along, we got the Bears hosting the New York Football Giants. Chicago sitting as 3.5-point home favorites. Game total at 47.5. Freeman, I hope for my best ball bags, this could finally be Darius Slayton boom week, okay? And by boom, I mean hopefully he actually catches a touchdown, maybe gives us 70 yards or something. But we've gotten close, okay? 2 weeks ago, we had a 70-yard score against the Eagles where we had a pretty ticky-tack OPI call, take it back. And even last week, he set season-high marks and targets, receptions, and yards. Unfortunately, it did drop. It would have been a 30-yard touchdown. So getting close. And I just think when you look at the Bears, who are a defense that hasn't been good against the deep ball, specifically 2 wide receivers, bottom 8 in pretty much every category when you're looking at that, I do like Darius Slayton as a boomer bust wide receiver 3, who actually, from arguably the first time this year, could boom instead of bust. So he's our wide receiver 37 in our Fantasy Life consensus ranks. That's ahead of guys like Christian Watson, Trey Tucker, Rashid Shaheed, Torrey Horton, still behind, the likes of Josh Downs and Troy Franklin. But yeah, looking good, hopefully, here for Darius Slayton this week. Otherwise, Wan'Dale Robinson, really the only other skill position player they should be overly interested in. Jackson Dart, though, is sitting pretty as a consensus top 10 quarterback in our ranks. Freedom for you, looking at the Bears, again, a situation where we got some injuries out there between Cole Kmet and DeAndre Swift that could change things up. You, however, want to be looking at someone who scored 2 touchdowns last week, not really in the traditional ways that we expected, but talk about DJ Moore and his potential here to boom in this spot.
Yeah, big picture, I want to be invested in the Bears. If you look at the Fantasy Life game model, we have them as a 5-star bet. And so you could take that investment just kind of betting on them, but also all the players in this game. Kyle Monangai, if DeAndre Swift is out, I think his breakout would continue. Colston Loveland, I think his breakout would continue if Cole Kmet is out. But DJ Moore, feel however you want about DJ Moore. And I will say, I'm something of a DJ Moore truther, so maybe I can't be totally objective in this. But since the team's week 5 bye, he has outpaced Rome Odunze in usage, 58 to 53 utilization score, and he's outpaced him in production, 269 yards and 2 touchdowns to 177 yards for Rome Odunze. And then last week, the number 3 wide receiver in fantasy points. And then you look at the matchup, the Giants could be without cornerbacks Paulson Adebo and Cordell Flott, and also free safety Javon Holland. So I know DJ Moore, he's not as consistent as you would want him to be, and he still has to compete with Rome Odunze and some other talented players on that team. But I'm not saying he's the number 1 wide receiver, but he is much closer to being the number 1 wide receiver than I think the market would suggest.
Certainly been tough sledding for Rome Odunze. If he's not going to turn around anytime soon, could certainly again be good times ahead for DJ Moore. Moving right along, we got the Seahawks hosting the Cardinals. Seahawks sitting as 6.5-point home favorites in this NFC West clash. Game total is at 45.5. So I want to look at the Arizona Cardinals kind of with and without Jacoby Brissett this year. And guys, it really does lean more so into Jacoby being the best quarterback for this team, at least in the year 2025. They have actually averaged 25.7 offensive points per game with Jacoby under center. That's good for the 13th highest mark during that stretch. But Kyler, it was just 18.8 and 26. So I will say Kyler lost those last 3 starts by a total of 5 points. So he was still putting him in a reasonable enough position to win. But hey, man, even outside the numbers, eye test really does tell you that this offense is grooving more so with Jacoby. So with Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously just had the 22.6 points per game below up against the Cowboys. We are liking that. But Trey McBride, that has really been the biggest difference. With Kyler Murray during those first 5 weeks, Trey McBride only averaged 12.5 PPR points per game. With Jacoby, though, we're already up to 22.4. So the touchdowns are flowing in. And again, life is looking good for these pass catchers with Jacoby Brissett under center, which he will be for at least the next 4 weeks, if not the entire season. So keep an eye on the status of Trey Benson. If he manages to find his way back, that could be interesting. But generally, I don't want to be putting these running backs into my lineups, if at all possible, really just changing on a week-to-week basis. Tough to be overly excited about any of them. Freeman, looking at the Seahawks, though, new wide receiver in town, someone who sure seems to fit this offense pretty freaking perfectly. Talk about Rashid Shaheed and your expectations here ahead of this Week 10 matchup.
Yeah, I think he gets a boost with the trade to the Seahawks for this week. Now, I'm skeptical that Shaheed will see more target volume for the season, but the quality of his targets should unquestionably improve. And then, especially, Ian, you pointed this out in your early Week 10 ranks piece. The Saints wide receivers have the toughest second half schedule out of any wide receiver group. So Shaheed got out of New Orleans at the right time and landed in a really good spot, especially because he is reuniting with offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak, who was the play caller last year for the Saints. And he played only 6 games with Kubiak before suffering an injury. But what we saw in those 6 games was pretty promising. 378 yards, 3 touchdowns on 41 targets and 6 carries, and then also had the punt return touchdown, which you can always have an option of getting that from Shaheed because he's one of the best return men in the league. And then you look at the Seahawks situation. Injuries to Cooper Kupp, Jake Bobo, and Derek Young. That means Shaheed right away should have plenty of opportunities to establish himself within the offense. And then going against the Cardinals, who are on a 1-day rest and prep disadvantage coming off of Monday Night Football, and they're playing their second straight road game. And then additionally, they might not have cornerback Max Melton, who's a starter on the perimeter for the team. So you put all that together, and it just feels like, oh man, Shaheed's about to go off for 120 yards and a touchdown on 7 targets. It just feels like everything is lining up in that direction. I think he has a great opportunity for a really big Seahawks debut.
And was saying in the kind of utilization report show we did yesterday here on the Fantasy Life show, just given his familiarity with the Clint Kubiak offense and how good he is stretching the field, I wouldn't be all that surprised if he has something close to a full-time role as early as this Sunday. Talking about this Sunday, on Sunday Night Football, we got the Chargers hosting the Steelers. Los Angeles sitting there as 3-point home favorites, if you can call it a home game. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of black and yellow in that crowd. Game total resting at 45.5. So they want to just give some love to Jalen Warren here, because as much as the Chargers managed to completely shut down the Vikings and Titans, before that, guys, it's not like they were functioning as this world beater group. In fact, they've given up 27 points in 3 consecutive games to the Washington Commanders, Miami Dolphins, and Indianapolis Colts. So with Jalen Warren, certainly has a great schedule after this week, going all the way up into the fantasy playoffs. But even in this game, would not discount the potential for Warren to provide some fireworks there on Sunday Night Football. Devon Achane torched his defense for 128 yards on the ground, 2 scores. Bill Crosby-Merritt had 111 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor did his thing and had a 3-touchdown game. Even J.K. Dobbins on just 11 carries had 83 yards and a tud in a nice little revenge game there against the Chargers. So Warren averaging 17 touches per game. He is our consensus RB17 ahead of Breece Hall, J.K. Dobbins, Travis Etienne, still behind Ashton Genty, Quinshon Judkins, and Kyron Williams. But yeah, if you have Jalen Warren, you're feeling pretty good about it for the time being. Freeman, looking at the Chargers, Lab McConkey obviously set up well. Keenan Allen has torched his defense over the years, but man, maybe it's a Rondé Gaston who fantasy managers should be getting especially excited about.
Yeah, a lot of players in this game who are well positioned, but man, Gadsden has basically been in God mode for the past month, especially considering that he's a rookie. But 377 yards, 2 touchdowns receiving on 27 targets, and a 94 utilization score. That is elite stuff. And then you look at the matchup. The Steelers, number 3 in most fantasy points allowed to tight ends. Starting strong safety Deshaun Elliott is out on IR with a knee injury. And then backups Chuck Clark and Jabril Peppers both missed last week and are uncertain. So, I mean, even if some of those guys are back, the Steelers just not good in pass defense against tight ends, and they might be missing some significant safeties there. So, Rondé Gadsden, I mean, it's like a similar situation with Dalton Kincaid, where you think like, surely this efficiency can't continue, but like it might continue for another week.
Certainly been looking the part. So from Sunday Night Football, we'll move on to Monday Night Football. We got the Packers hosting the well-rested Eagles. Green Bay sitting as 2.5-point favorites in Lambeau, game total of 44.5. So we'll see how some of the injury stuff with Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown, kind of work out following their bye. But regardless, guys, shout out to Devontae Smith. This dude is just playing incredible, I would argue even career best football. Watching some of the routes that he was putting on film in that New York Giants game before the bye really was incredible. So on the season now, he's wide receiver 15 in PPR points per game. A.J. Brown's wide receiver 34. And yet, I'm the only alleged expert ranker at Fantasy Life that has the balls to put Devontae Smith ahead of A.J. Brown in those rankings. So glad to be on an island there. Freeman, get better. But yeah, guys, Devontae Smith absolutely balling this year. ESPN says he's the 5th best wide receiver in the league. PFF says he's the 10th. And man, just the last 4 games has been remarkable. Mentioned the Giants game, looking and just awesome. Didn't exactly blow up, but 114 yards against the Broncos, 183 yards in a touchdown against the Vikings. Those are supposed to be really tough spots that just didn't matter because that's how good Devontae is playing. So consensus wide receiver 15 for us. Even those rankers that have AJB ahead, still very high on Devontae Smith. He's ahead of Zay Flowers, Garrett Wilson, Stephon Diggs, Chris Olave. And again, just absolutely looking like someone who you're pretty happy with if you went ahead and drafted in the middle rounds last August. Freeman, looking at those Green Bay Packers, again, got a pretty banged up wide receiver room, but the one wide receiver they've had get healthy in recent weeks, playing pretty darn well.
Yeah, Christian Watson. I mean, there's nothing spectacular about his target volume since returning from injury 2 weeks ago, just 8 targets. But with those targets, he's number 2 on the team with a 36% share of air yards, and he's turned that into 143 yards receiving. Now, of course, that's unsustainable. He's not going to average 17.9 yards per target and a 23.1 ADOT for the rest of the season. But on the other hand, like, he's a bona fide big play merchant. He has a career mark of 10 yards per target and a 15.9 ADOT. Like, he should continue to produce at an efficient rate, and I would expect his usage to increase now that tight end Tucker Kraft is out for the year with a knee injury. And then on top of that, Matthew Golden dealing with the shoulder injury, Dontavian Wicks dealing with the ankle injury. They are questionable. And wide receiver Jaden Reed with the shoulder is uncertain to be activated for this game. And guillotine leagues, like, he's a boom bust guy. That makes me a little bit uncertain about starting him. But man, I mean, for the rest of the season from here on out, Could he lead the Packers in fantasy scoring? The Packers wide receivers in fantasy scoring? Yeah, like that's possible.
Love seeing that out of Watson, someone who, again, was really making some big plays last year before that injury. Certainly looking healthy now. Guys, 3 more matchups, all with a game total under 40. But before we get to those, just want to say thank you for tuning into the Fantasy Live show, whether it's audio or video. Just a reminder, you can check us out on Roku Sports, Fubo Sports, the Unbeaten Sports channel, Apple, Spotify, and then everywhere, again, you find your audio podcast. So always appreciate subscriptions, liking, commenting, all that jazz as well. So once again, just thank you. Give yourself a nice pat on the back. Freedman, moving right back along, we got the Panthers taking on the Saints. Carolina sitting as 5.5-point home favorites. How bad do you have to be 5.5-point dogs to Carolina Panthers? I guess that's your New Orleans Saints. Game total again at 39.5. So speaking of those Saints, just trying to figure out who's going to benefit the most from this actual, Rashid Shaheed trade. Yeah, I guess you could say Chris Olave, but the dude's already second in the NFL behind only Jamar Chase in targets. How many more can he actually get per game? I'm also not really in the business of getting too excited about Devon Vele or Mason Titton or, God forbid, Brandon Cooks in the year 2025. So honestly, I think it's Jawan Jesus, baby. When you look at what he's done this year, the tight end 2 in the first 3 weeks of the year, and then miserable. I mean, we're talking about the tight end 50 in PPR points per game from weeks 4 through 6. I'm surprised we even had 50 dudes listed in the utilization report tool. But these last 3 weeks, things have started to go better for Juwan Johnson again. Tight end 14 with 11.8 PPR points per game. So obviously has that college connection with Tyler Shuck going all the way back to their days at Oregon. And this matchup, guys, really is setting up well. Panthers are dead last in EPA allowed on targets to tight ends and pretty much bottom 3 in any other metric you want to look at. So only the tight end 17, amongst our rankers. But if you are trying to replace Travis Kelce on bye or, Jake Ferguson or one of these guys, I do think you could do a lot worse than Juwan Johnson in this spot. Meanwhile, Freeman, you got a Carolina Panthers team that, again, should have Rico Dowdle available. The DNP wasn't ideal to start the week, but seems like they're just managing the guy because, as we saw last week, finally Dave Canales' company ready to give this dude a true featured role.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think they're managing him because they've just been piling on the work for him, especially last week. But we have seen now 3 games with Rico Dowdle where he has had a snap rate of at least 70%. So weeks 5 and 6 when Chuba Hubbard was out, and then finally week 9, Chuba Hubbard was active, but he was clearly the number 2 back behind Rico Dowdle. In those 3 games, he has been a top 2 fantasy back each game, 30.9, 31.9, 27.1 fantasy points in those games. And if we widen the sample to see what Dowdle has done since week 3, he has 832 yards and 5 touchdowns in 7 games. Like, he is just absolutely slaying right now. And I don't see why that stops in week 10. Ian, as you mentioned, the Panthers are 5.5-point home favorites. So Dowdle could see 20 plus opportunities in this game with a really run friendly script. And then the Panthers are at home where they've had a significant home field advantage, the league's number 2 home field advantage over the past 16 games. And then, of course, playing the Saints, who last week allowed Kyron Williams and Blake Corum 172 yards and a touchdown rushing. I mean, this is just the definition of a smash bot. I think we see Dowdle absolutely dominate. And I mean, the question is like, how high is too high for ranking him? And honestly, if someone ranked him in the top 3, I really wouldn't think they were wrong. Like, it's justifiable. It's within the realm of reality.
Didn't it feel wild doing the rankings, Freeman, and actually putting this dude ahead of Saquon and Derrick Henry and those guys?
Yeah, I mean, but it's been warranted based on, I know it's only 3 games, but based on what we've seen and then the circumstances of home favorite against the Saints, you feel like it's warranted.
Rico Dowdle, take a bow on the best stories of the season. Hopefully still has plenty more good times to come. Second to last game here on the Fantasy Live show. We got the Texans hosting the Jaguars. Texans sitting as 1.5-point home faves. Could be dropping a bit, though, with the CJ Stroud news. Game total, again, here out of lowly 38. So, again, Davis Mills under center. Also keep an eye on Nick Chubb. He did not practice on Wednesday due to a foot injury. Would be a nice, burst there for Woody Marks if he is going to be missing time. But I just hope Davis Mills can exist in those 2.5 seconds between getting the snap and throwing the football in Nico Collins' general vicinity. Because, guys, this dude has torched the Jaguars over recent years. Last 4 matchups, 104 yards and a touchdown, 151 yards and a touchdown, buck 19, and then 104 more yards, and yes, 1 more touchdown to the total. So I know it hasn't been the best season for Nico Collins. You can talk about the scheme, the offensive line, or Nico himself. Hopefully, though, Davis Mills has what it takes to get Nico back on track, and hopefully his best football is still going to be coming in the second half. I know my best ball bags and all that screaming I did about Nico this summer summer would certainly appreciate that. So again, winnable enough matchup here. And I will say, when we did see Davis Mills coming last week, he did force feed Nico a team high 8 targets. Dalton Schultz was the only guy even close with 6. So feeling good-ish about Nico. Still going to be a recommended start in pretty much any fantasy league you got out there. Freeman looking at the Jaguars. Jacoby Myers, the new man in town. We did have news also that Brian Thomas Jr. is not practicing this week. So it does seem like they could need more out of Jacoby, than maybe anyone was expecting as soon as this Sunday.
Yeah. So long term, I don't think this is like a big upgrade for Jacoby Myers with the trade. But in the short term, with Brian Thomas looking very unlikely to play, with Travis Hunter being out with a knee injury, with De'Ami Brown dealing with concussion, and with Tim Patrick having the groin issue, you put all that together and it's like, oh man, they need Jacoby Myers right away. So he could see a ton of volume this week as the number 1 pass catcher. And the matchup isn't good going against the Texans defense, which is, number 1 against the pass. And then of course, quarterback Trevor Lawrence, he hasn't looked all that great in his first year with offensive head coach Liam Cohen. But if Thomas is out and if De'Ami Brown, if he's out, man, it's going to be hard for Myers not to have like 8 targets this week. And that feels like a minimum. And if that's the case, it's hard not to have him in your lineup.
Fair point. Hopefully, again, better days come for Jacoby. He has not scored a touchdown yet this year. Re-embracing those early career Patriots days a little bit too much, if you ask me. On to the last one, guys. We have saved the worst for last. Don't worry. We got the Jets, Jets hosting the Browns. Cleveland sitting as 2.5-point road favorites. Game total, again, the lowest of the week at 37.5. So I'm just hoping we get Garrett Wilson back here, guys, because honestly, even with arguable league worst quarterback play between Justin Fields and Tyrod Taylor, we've still seen Garrett work as a freaking great wide receiver. 16.6 PPR points per game. That's good for wide receiver 9 status. Better than Justin Jefferson, better than Emeka Egbuka, obviously among any others. And he's done it again despite having Fields and Tyrod not exactly putting their best foot forward. I do hope it's Fields. I think he earned the job winning actually a game for the Jets. And also Tyrod Taylor, guys, as much as I can't admit that, okay, maybe just in terms of if you need a better passer for 60 minutes, I guess you could say Tyrod, but it's not like he's been putting up the numbers to suggest that this year. He's the second worst quarterback in the league, only ahead of Cooper Rush in terms of adjusted yards per attempt. And then just again, even the one game we did see him start against the Buccaneers, yeah, the counter numbers look fine by the end, but this dude only had 80 yards on his first 27 dropbacks before getting going in the fourth quarter down multiple touchdowns, which, yes, I understand. Justin Fields does plenty as well, but just a situation where, again, you got the younger guy who's going to be on your team likely next year because of the contract. Really don't know what you're accomplishing by putting Taylor out there. So we'll see what happens, but hopefully, again, the one consistent thing we'll have is Garrett Wilson balling out. And hopefully Breece Hall is not feeling any, sort of new injuries popping up after he didn't get that trade that he reportedly, allegedly was suggesting. So that's what I got with the Jets, Freeman. But as we saw, with no more Sauce Gardner, no more Quinnen Williams, maybe this Browns offense actually could have a little bit more upside than expected against a defense that's quickly looking like they're now one of the league's worst.
Yeah, I mean, what a symphony of sorrow this game is, the Browns and the Jets. And I mean, you mentioned, we go from top to bottom in terms of game total, 37.5 the total in this game. And man, that feels too high. Like, I'm looking at the game model and we've got it projected at 35.7. I will probably be betting the under, but looking at the Browns, Cedric Tillman, the Browns expect him to return from this hamstring injury coming out of the bye. And then over the past year, the Jets have parted ways with Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, Michael Carter, and Brandon Echols in the secondary. Unsurprisingly, they're number 31 in defensive pass DVOA. I mean, I don't really have much enthusiasm for anyone playing in this game, which is why I'm betting the under. But Cedric Tillman, who knows, going against a just depleted secondary, maybe he has a chance of having a big game here.
There's ever a game to put on ESPN or ABC at this point, it would be this one. So get your crap together, YouTube, TV, Disney, all those guys. But I digress. Guys, thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. If you like the show, then like the show. Always appreciate when you guys hit that subscribe button as well. We'll be back tomorrow breaking down our rankings ahead of Week 10. So in the meantime, good luck in those waiver wire streets and get ready for another slate of action. So for Freeman, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everybody.